Really honored to be here today and really honored to serve as your moderator. So just a few things I would like to keep in mind as we get started today. One, as you've probably noticed, you are muted and everybody will stay muted during the presentation just to help minimize background noise. So you won't be able to unmute yourself. And again, we do invite you to drop questions in the chat at any time. We will be monitoring the chat and passing along all of your questions during the Q&A portion. We also ask that if your question is for a specific panelist, if you'll be sure and just include their name along with your question, then we can direct it specifically to this person. And we'll also be sharing helpful links and materials in the chat as we go. And finally, I do want to let everybody know that the session is being recorded. We will be posting it online. So if you would like to receive the recording or any of the materials that we're sharing here today, along with any future updates, if you'll just add your email through the link that we'll be sharing in the chat. Okay, excellent. Before we dive in, I do want to share just a really quick personal story. This topic really hits home for me. So earlier this year, I opened my mom's property tax statement and was really shocked to find that her property taxes had actually tripled, which she's owned her home for 30 years. And suddenly her homestead exemption was just dropped and we didn't know about it. I didn't know who to call. I didn't know what the next step was. And so, I knew if I didn't know, I knew that there must be a lot of other families out there that were just as overwhelmed and confused as I would. So one of the many reasons that I'm really grateful for our panelists and this conversation that we're going to have today. Wanted to let you know we are also honored to have Councilwoman Jeanette Martinez, who represents District 11 on the Fort Worth City Council, joining us today. So thank you, Councilwoman, for being here. If there are any other public leaders or elected officials that have joined us today, we would love to acknowledge you as well. So again, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat so that we can recognize your presence today. So to set up our panel topic, so today's conversation and discussion that we're going to have is all about helping you to better understand how your property taxes and your homestead exemptions actually affect your financial stability. And ultimately, it's about your ability to build and protect generational wealth. So we are going to break down just a few key processes. We'll be sharing some helpful tips and here to answer your questions during the Q&A process. So we want you to leave here feeling like a more confident in navigating all of these systems as a homeowner. So just a quick flow of the agenda for today. So again, we're going to start with just a few introductions about who's in the room and what each speaker will bring to the discussion today. And then we will begin with short presentations from each of our three panelists. And then we'll move into a discussion and finally your questions. And we expect to wrap up around 1:15 this afternoon. So with all of that said, I would like to invite Vicki Vargas. She's the president of Worth Heights Neighborhood Association, just to say a few words.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Kirsten. My name is Vicki Vargas, and I'm president of the Worth Heights Neighborhood Association, and we welcome everybody that's online and that will join us later on. Welcome to Protecting Generational Wealth Part 1, Understanding Property Taxes and Homestead Exemptions. We aim to equip you with the tools and information needed to navigate the complexities of property taxes and homestead exemptions, and we have a great panel that will help us do that. We're grateful for the collaborative efforts of our esteemed partners whose hard work has made this workshop possible. Councilwoman Jeanette Martinez, City of Fort Worth, District 11, Marcela Nava, Associate Professor, UTA School of Social Work, Rosemary Galdiano, Worth Heights Neighborhood Association, and of course, our moderator, Kirsten Wiggins. Again, welcome, and I'll turn the program back over to Kirsten.
Great. Thank you so much, Vicki. And I do want to say thank you to Worth Heights Neighborhood Association for really helping to bring this conversation to life today. Thank you. All right. Well, so let me now briefly introduce our panelists for today. First up, we have Mr. Joe Don Bobbitt. He is the Chief Appraiser of the Tarrant County, the Tarrant District Appraisal District. He brings a wealth of experience and is going to help us understand how the appraisal process works and what exemptions are available. And second, we have Dr. Adriana Reyes Sanchez. She is an assistant professor in planning at the University of Texas at Arlington. And her research focuses on housing precarity and challenges that communities often face in navigating the property laws. And finally, we have Mr. Chandler Crouch. He is a real estate broker and a passionate advocate for homeowners. He has helped thousands of families for free protest unfair property tax assessments, and he's going to give us just some practical tools to take action today. All right, great. So let's jump in with our first speaker, Joe Don. Take it away.
Good morning. My name is, or afternoon, I guess now. My name is Joe Don Bobbitt. I'm the Chief Appraiser for Tarrant Appraisal District. We are responsible for appraising all property in the county and in administering all exemptions. The purpose of that is, one, for property tax purposes, we're trying to determine a fair value to make sure that whatever the tax rates the entity set, make sure you're taxed on a fair amount for your house or your property. We do this, it's this mass appraisal. So we're looking at 600 to 700,000 properties. We have less than 100 actual appraisers in our office. And so that is it's an extremely high number of property that we're looking at. We do not believe we are the most accurate. We try to be accurate on a whole, but we realize there are properties with there are issues with some of our appraisals. And that's what the appeal season or the protest season is for. And so as we come into April through July, that's an opportunity for the taxpayers to come in and let us know that an assumption we made about their property is incorrect. And so we can try to get that resolved before the tax bills actually go out. And so it is part of the process. By law, if you hired a fee appraiser to come out and look at your property, they might spend 30 minutes on your property. We don't have time for that. And so it's intended to be a very fast, mass appraisal kind of model. And we know there's going to be mistakes involved, but we try to get those remedied. But then we try to make sure all the exemptions are correct and up to date. So we have some slides that we can go through in a little bit whenever that time comes. But overall, that's kind of what we're here for. You can go to the next slide. So what it comes down to, a lot of it, most people need to make sure that they have their exemptions that they're available and they're entitled to. And so currently for the homestead is $100,000 from the appraised value. And so that applies to school districts. The legislature is looking at changing this in the future, but until they change this, what is currently allowed is $100,000 off the value. The requirement is it has to be your property. You have to own it. It has to be your primary residence. You cannot claim any other homestead. Some people, we see Florida or Colorado seem to be common. People have multiple houses. If two individuals marry that have their own property, they have to drop the homestead for one of those properties. A married couple cannot have two homesteads, not per person, it's per married couple. You have to have a state ID that's current and shows your address. And then the deadline is April 30th, but the deadline is the softest deadline I've ever seen. We can accept an application up to 2 years after the date. And so a lot of times people will come in, they won't realize it until they get their appraisal notice. They may realize that, whoops, my homestead fell off a couple years ago, and we can put that back on for up to 2 years in the past. Next slide, please. This one is relatively new. So now there's an inherited homestead. It's called an heirship property or heirship homestead. The exemption is the same, but essentially if an owner is deceased and they left their property, hasn't gone through probate, one of the children, if they live there, or one of the heirs, if they live there, they can provide us some additional documentation, and they're entitled to the entire homestead, just like if they were the actual owner. But that's relatively new. Next slide. Over 65 or disabled, it provides an additional $10,000 value exemption, but also provides a freeze. And there's some confusion with the freeze. Most people assume that it's the tax rate freezes or that the value freezes. The value can still continue to change, but the actual tax amount that you send to the school is the amount that gets frozen. And so that dollar amount is basically captured and frozen. And if we later determine that your exemption should be less, or that your what you should pay in taxes would actually decrease because the value decreased or because the exemption increased, then we'll recalculate that and actually lower the freeze. And so it's really more of a ceiling than a freeze. Freeze is just a common terminology everybody uses. But it has to be on your homestead. You have to be over 65 during the year. So even if you qualify, your birthday's on December 31st, you turn 65, you qualify for the entire year. If you're a disabled person, you can't have disabled person and over 65 on the same property for the same entity. So most entities will adopt an optional over 65 exemption. And if they do that, depends on whether they can adopt how much of an exemption they get, but the school is the one that's mandatory for $10,000. And the only change to the ceiling, unless the value decreases and we have to recalculate it, if you add new structures, if you add a garage, you add a pool, that can disturb your freeze or your ceiling, and we'll add the new value, the new tax associated with that new structure. And so you may see it change, but it'll be because something new was added to the property. Next slide, please. Disabled veterans, this is fairly common in the county. There are multiple disabled veteran exemptions. We have to have a letter from the Veterans Administration letting us know your level of disability. Even surviving spouses can qualify, but there are some requirements that have to be met. If you think you're entitled to a disabled veteran exemption, please come in and talk to us. It can get rather complicated for this conversation. Next slide, please. The homestead application. In the news recently, there's been some confusion on whether people need to reapply every year or every 5 years. We will send you a letter if you need to reapply. And so unless you see a letter from us, basically, you can check on our website. You go to tad.org, pull up your property. At the very bottom, it'll show that you have a homestead on the property. And we're not allowed to show if you have an over 65 because we don't want people to be targeted if they're disabled or over 65 or they might be vulnerable. So that won't show, but you can call and we can verify that you have an over 65 exemption. And the over 65 will show on the appraisal notice. But unless we send you a letter, you don't have to reapply unless you're missing the exemption. Next slide, please. On our website, tad.org, tad.org, we have the section forms, and under it, you can find all the exemption applications. There's quite a few of them, but the homestead application is the one that's most common. And right underneath where it says all forms, there's the homestead exemption. We can actually apply online. And so we encourage you to apply online. It's a faster service, and you'll actually get you'll see it show up on our website quicker. There's a place for you to upload your driver's license. That way we can validate that your address on the driver's license matches the property you're applying for. Next slide, please. This is a rough example of the benefit of a homestead exemption. So for a generic $250,000 house, without an exemption, you would pay roughly $4,749 in taxes. With just a homestead, you could save roughly $1,500. With a homestead and over 65 or disabled person, you could save almost $2,000. So it adds up. And so it is very important that if you don't have this, make sure you get in contact with us. Go to our website, fill out the online application. We want you to have any exemption you're entitled to. Next slide, please. This is an example of our appraisal notice. We're about to send these out. April 15th, about 300,000 of these things will be mailed out. And so on it, it has your online PIN in the top right corner. That is your unique identifier. It's basically like your password to log into our dashboard. The account number is between the two stars on the left side. It's an 8-digit number. and that will get you to your account, and then the password is the online PIN. And that will allow you to establish your online dashboard where you can file a protest. You can, you don't have to do exemptions through that dashboard anymore, but you can basically see a lot of information on your property, and it helps us interact with you. And then below that, it shows your protest deadline, which is typically May 15th, unless we send the notice after April 15th. We have 30 days. You have 30 days to file a protest from the day we mail the notice. But then it shows the prior year value and the current year value. And if you're getting this notice, it's because the value has changed from the prior year. Next slide, please. It'll also show the taxable value for each entity. We don't show the estimated tax anymore. A lot of people like to see the estimated tax on there, but that is a whole nother process that takes place after us. And so we don't display that on there anymore because it can be misleading. Next slide. This is where you'll see your exemptions. So if you have a homestead or disabled veteran or over 65, all your exemptions will be displayed, and they'll show you the amount for each entity. Next slide. For one of the new things that happened this year, we have a new reappraisal plan. And so there's a lot of residential properties that will not be reappraised. And so if the value is not changing, you'll be receiving a postcard in the mail that says essentially, your value hasn't changed, but you still have the right to file a protest. And so if you disagree with the value of the property still, by all means, file a protest online, use the online dashboard. Let us know that you have a problem. 90% of the protests we can resolve online. And so we're sending a postcard instead of an appraisal notice because we want people to realize that there is a difference and that their value didn't change. If you receive a notice, it more than likely will be because you have a homestead cap, and the homestead cap protected your property from increases in value over the last 4 to 5 years. And so for homestead properties, we can only increase 10% per year. And so that is a benefit that everybody's benefited from for the last several years while the markets have been kind of hot. But now that the market's starting to kind of cool off, there's still leftover market that hasn't been taxed. And so it may take a year or two for the appraised value to catch up with actual market value. And so they may see, some people will still see an increase in their appraised value. Next slide. With the appraisal notice, we mail you a protest form. And so we're basically inviting you to file a protest every time we send you an appraisal notice. And we out of 600,000 or 700,000 accounts, we receive about 200 some odd thousand. So almost 30% of properties file a protest, and that's everybody's right. We don't want to, we don't want to necessarily encourage them, but we don't want to disencourage people either. If they think there's something wrong with their value or your exemption, we want you to come let us know. Next slide. This on the protest form, you have quite a few options on that you can check as far as what you believe is incorrect on the property. The most common one, the top left, there's a checkbox where market value and or value is unequal compared to other properties. That means just you don't know what, but there's something wrong with the value. You can pick that. That's what most people do. Or to the right of that, there's market's incorrect or the value is unequal. So if you know specifically that it wouldn't sell for this, or we're not treating you fairly compared to your neighbors, you can pick one of those specifically. We would still encourage you to follow the button on the left, the checkbox on the left that says one or the other. That way you can discuss anything you want as far as the value. There's some other options, but they're a lot less common. But anyways, next slide, please. So we do need people to sign it and tell us how you want your hearing notice. So once we schedule you for a protest, we'll mail you a letter that says when your hearing date is. And so you have options to pick on that. Next slide. The deadline to file is May 15th or 30 days after the notice was mailed, whichever is later. So with residential, all of them are being mailed, or 90% of them are being mailed April 15th. So May 15th will be the deadline. Commercial properties will have usually until closer to June 1st before most of those are due. we encourage you to use the online dashboard. If you give us your opinion of value on the online dashboard, we can try to negotiate with you, or we may accept your value if it's close. We also encourage you to speak with an appraiser. Out of everybody that comes and speaks with us, where we resolve roughly 90%. There are about 10% that we can't agree with, and so then at that point you can go to the formal protest and talk to the appraisal review board, and that's a group of usually 3 taxpayers that act as a judge and jury, and so they determine what they think the value should be based on our evidence and based on what your arguments are. We would encourage you to bring 10 to 15 pictures of your property with any issues that you have with the property. If there's any deferred maintenance, we don't need 100 pictures. We just need a few that show what the issues are, whether it's foundation issues, sheetrock issues, roof issues. We just need some pictures. That way our appraisers can look at it and make an appropriate adjustment. If you have access to sales, we would like to see that. There may be sales that we don't have access to or we're not aware of that have taken place in your neighborhood. And we want to make sure that we're reflecting what has actually taken place in the market. If you can't resolve it with one of my appraisers, you can go before the ARB panel, the appraisal review board panel, but you don't have to be nervous. A lot of people are concerned that it's like a court hearing. They're just 3 people like y'all, and so you don't have to be concerned about that. Just go in there, tell them what's wrong with the property. Most hearings take 15 to 20 minutes, and then you'll be out the door. There may be a 15 to up to 2 hour wait sometimes for a hearing, but we try to keep that closer to 15, 30 minute wait to get into a hearing. Next slide. This is our contact information. So we're at 2500 Hanley Edderville Road, and we have our most common email addresses, res@tad.org, and they can get most of your comments or your issues. But first, we'd recommend you file a protest. That way we know what your problem is and we can try to get it resolved. That's my quick version.
Well, thank you so much. That was very helpful, and look forward to asking some follow-up questions here soon. Our second panelist, Dr. Reyes Sanchez. Would love to hear from you and a lot of what your research is showing.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, so just bear with me. I'm not very good in Zoom. So am I showing my slides or?
Yes, it looks great.
We in UTA use Teams. So anyway, so thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with panelists. So I have to say that I'm an academic, so I don't often interact with county or appraisal officers. So it's great, and because I use a lot of the data that they provide, so that's a privilege. But more importantly, I really hope my presentation makes sense for the people of the community, and especially communities that may seem vulnerable in the county. So, well, I'm gonna be talking a little bit about the research that I do that focuses on housing quality or precarity and heterogeneity that I have found. So although my research has used Dallas County data, I think it speaks to the DFW Metroplex, and I can speak about my experiences in that round if you want to. And secondly is how vulnerable residents must navigate sometimes complex and confusing regulatory frameworks related to property that may preclude their opportunities to, benefit from policies such as exemptions that we just that we are talking today, and how I believe participatory approaches and community development can help. But I just wanna tell you as well that I'm originally from Mexico City, and my previous research back in the years focuses on housing. I was raised in a multi-generational dwelling unit in Mexico City where, I live with my grandmother and my uncles and my cousins, so we grew up together. So from my research, I've learned that, you know, housing is very important, and perhaps the most important patrimony or asset for low-income families, not only in Mexico, but also in Texas. Now I have expanded my research to Texas, and I have done more or less 4 years of research in North Texas, and have worked extensively with low-income communities. And I try to expand to Tarrant County, if you allow me, and maybe I can work with the community as well. But I want to show you a little bit of what I have done with my fantastic PhD students here in UTA. So one of the things that I have been interested is exploring housing quality issues and, you know, precarity and differences of the services that communities access. There is a lot of research on housing precarity and low quality housing, houses that are not compliant with regulations of property or building regulations. It focuses on the US-Mexico border. But kind of my research in Doughlas County tell us that these issues are present in the DFW. It's not an issue of the US-Mexico border at all. It's everywhere. And I mean, not only me, but, you know, there is a lot of evidence that there are communities that are facing housing precarity. And that really influences in the ways that they experience living conditions. And so this is Doughlas County, as you can see. Although there is poverty in urban areas, this paper only focuses on the peripheries, which is not the city, but kind of this interface between the city and rural communities. It is the Doughlas County. And I use some criteria of density. But anyway, so in this map, what I'm trying to show is communities that are facing low quality housing, because primarily the housing is mobile home, manufactured homes, or aging dwelling units. There are in reds, and you can see that are shown in red. I hope I'm showing my cursor here and my mouse. Yes, so it is in Southeast Dallas. So there is like a huge concentration of low quality houses. And in these low quality houses are also related because some of these communities are not part of the county, which means that are unincorporated. And these communities tend to have less access to services, utilities, and face precarity. So in these houses, families also have less access to heating and cooling systems. So even if they have dwelling units, they don't have central air conditioning or heating, and they face very uncomfortable indoor temperatures that expose people's health. So I have done also qualitative work in Southeast Dallas and work with communities. And I have found how difficult it is for them to understand regulations and how much they care about, these taxes increases. And I mean, from their perspective, they feel that these increases in taxes, may unfortunately lead to the displacement. So that's the type of research that I have done in Doughlas County. And I mean, speaking with residents and how difficult it is for them. So I believe that this is a fantastic panel because we learned today a lot about regulations and how can low-income families benefit from tax exemptions. But I just want to remind you that, like a significant part of the population may not be eligible, may not comply with some of the requirements that many of these policies require, such as, state ID, clear property. Like one of the obstacles of low-income families face is that if if they are inheriting. So this is a picture of my fieldwork. So with PhD students and students from UTA, we go to the community and spend long time. So I've been working in this community for 4 years. So you can click on this and look at our participatory research. But there are houses that are in very bad shape, and they are not eligible to receive housing upgrading because of the complexity of regulations or unincorporated status of these communities. And then, however, I have seen that people in these communities have a lot of resources. So as I told you, I'm originally from Mexico, and I have seen that many residents have the ability to do self-help housing efforts. So they know construction empirically, and they can improve their houses, living conditions, and their living conditions. So I have seen that in many different communities in the US, also people practice self-help, right? And that would be improvements in their housing and living conditions, which is good. But sometimes they struggle to understand what is required, what is permitted, what is how to do a building permit, and so they can improve their living conditions. So I think that's kind of the intersection, or kind of what I'm trying to highlight in this presentation, because I can speak a lot about housing quality issues, but I believe that this is kind of a very important issue. I mean, you asked me in the questions that look at World Heights community. I haven't personally used data from the Tarrant County for my research, but I'm trying to expand, and I'm doing a project on energy insecurity and housing precarity. But I use satellite imageries and to look at the houses, and I think that there is a heterogeneity in housing quality. I just use Luis helped me to get some imagery to understand the variation of housing quality, and the diversity of perhaps the evaluation that different families will get from their homes. And then I took a picture just to demonstrate that in our communities, there is a wide variation in the living conditions and the quality of the homes. And hopefully, if we can clarify and perhaps do some reforms to these programs, people that are currently ineligible or ineligible can benefit from that. So one of the obstacles I see for people in the Tarrant County accessing to this is, state IDs, clear property title, which is very complicated, because think about of houses or families that share properties with their adult children, and there's not like a clear will or a property title. It would be difficult. So what I'm trying to say is that there is a huge need for legal or perhaps professors or social workers like you, Kirsten, you go into these communities to explain this. How can people regularize and make these improvements formal, and so they can benefit from that. But at the same time, I believe authorities need to have this flexibility and a lot of human resources to do that. So I believe that there is a huge need for more participatory community development workshops like this one. That is fantastic. I think going to the communities is very important. Do it bilingual so we can reach non-English speakers, also, people that speak other languages. And I believe that the county does a good job in providing these resources in multiple languages. But more importantly, as people may be intimidated, sometimes by regulation, I think education is very important. So I haven't been to community World Heights, but I believe that maybe community centers or schools or as community-based organizations may be kind of the bridge for breaking these obstacles. And so as I said, some of the obstacles I see is how can we do to help people comply with property regulations so they can access to these opportunities. And I believe that community development is necessary. What you are doing is fantastic, and I think it has to be expanded. So as I said, I wish I can work with you in the community and do my best to raise this awareness and this grassroots knowledge that can help. So my conclusion is that yes, residents must navigate complex regulatory frameworks, and community-based organizations and stakeholders can support residents navigating these challenges. And I believe that in myself, I would be happy to work in this type of initiatives that are necessary. And yeah, so that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sanchez. Love your research, and it has some very promising deals for, again, actual homeowners and community development as well. So thank you so much. Thank you so much. All right, so we have our third and final panelist today, Chandler Crouch. And Chandler's going to talk through some of the basics and just kind of give us the overlay. And so, yeah, please, we'd love to hear from you, Chandler.
You got it. Well, it is a pleasure to be on, and I just want to thank the other panelists for showing up. It sounds like this is the first time I've met Dr. Sanchez, and it sounds like you're doing a lot of great work, and our hearts are aligned. I want to help people that are in a position where they're trying to protect their home, protect their value, and it kind of goes back to the theme of this whole webinar, which is protecting the generational wealth. Joe Don Bobbitt, Chief Appraiser for the Tarrant Appraisal District, you will not have anybody else, that you won't get the opportunity to talk to anybody else that knows more about property tax values and the protest process than him. So we're lucky to be here. Thank y'all for putting this on. So I just wanted to mention, let's go back to the theme for a second, which is protecting generational wealth. For just a moment, if it's okay, I'm just going to share my screen and go over a couple of things really quick that kind of relate to that and kind of bring it home, and then I'll get into some nuts and bolts and practically show you what you can do to protect your value. So one thing I wanted to mention, this is all about protecting generational wealth, and we're all here talking about real estate and property taxes, and it's the reason this graph kind of shows the reason we're focused in this area. It's because this graph shows the property values over time, and these gray areas here represent the periods of recession. And you can see this recession right here was the one that got a lot of headlines, and it hit our country very hard. In fact, they called that the Great Recession, and it was a real estate related recession. You can see real estate values dropped pretty significantly during that time, but that was a unique recession. All these other gray periods of gray don't necessarily correlate with a downturn. In fact, if you do the math and you look at the periods of property value appreciation during these recession periods, then you'll find that the real estate market actually has done quite well in recession time periods. And if you just look, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 recessions represented on this graph, and only one of them was caused by real estate. So I think that the odds of having another real estate related recession are very low. And if you want your generational wealth to be protected, then there's no better place to start than home ownership. But doesn't do you any good to have home ownership if the value of your property is getting taxed to death and you're getting forced out of your home because of property taxes. And just like some of the slides we just saw, this is a unique kind of tax where there is no exemption for low income. If you are low income, low property value, you're subject to the same exact system that everybody else is. Doesn't matter if you have a $30,000 home, which is pretty rare these days, or a $3 million home. It's the same system. Now, I will say this, the homestead exemption that we have today is probably the best protection that you have for protecting your value in your home and your generational wealth, because the way this exemption is set up, it really does cater to the lower property value homes. And so I just want to, just for a moment, dive into how that homestead exemption works. And then I'll talk a little bit about property tax. And then I think that where a lot of the benefit will be in what I can share is I might even have a question for Chief Appraiser Joe Don Bobbitt, because I think that a lot of the value is just realizing what isn't true, that are rumors out there that might prevent you from taking advantage of the system that's designed for you to protect your value. So let me just go to the Tarrant Appraisal District website for just a moment. I know that a lot of people watching may be in a different county. Every county has a comparable website and system here on how you can navigate this and see some of the same stuff that I'm going to show here for Tarrant County in your own county, even if you're not in Tarrant. Okay, so in Tarrant County, just like any other county, you're going to just look up your property. And it's just like any other website that you can run a search on. It's really usually pretty simple. And you can see the one that I'm looking up is my own property, because I'm not going to, all this is public data, public information. Anybody can go on and look up just about anybody's property, but so I'm just using mine as an example. So this is the Appraisal District website. And just like Mr. Bobbitt mentioned, the only thing the Appraisal District does is value the property, and then they maintain records. They're in charge of maintaining the records of the exemptions, and you would go file your homestead exemption with the Appraisal District. But the math that takes place where they actually calculate your tax bill is an entirely different government entity altogether. It's the tax assessor's office. It's just really easy to find the tax assessor's office if you start at the Appraisal District. So you just go here, you look up your property, and then you can click a link. This one on the Tarrant District, it's right here. So I'm going to click that and show you. This is the government entity that actually calculates your tax bill. So after the Appraisal District, let me find the value section here. After the Appraisal District does their valuation, you can see this year's value is pending, but last year the value ended up to be $299,000. They calculate their value. They send this information over to the tax assessor along with any information having to do with your homestead exemption. They send it over here, and then these guys will calculate the tax bill. And so one of the easiest ways to look at, I think this is a really cool function here. You can look at the actual tax bills of all the previous years, and you can see how on this house it was at $5,600, then it went down one year, then it jumped up tremendously, and then it went down again, and now it's creeping back up. The reason it went down so much is because of some of the new laws that are there to protect people, and it relates directly to your homestead exemption. So I want to just show you how it's calculated. I'm going to show you the exact tax bill where this was calculated and show you how it works. So I'm going to try not to, there's so many numbers involved that we can talk about, and there's different labels. What I would like to try and do is just kind of zero in on the thing to pay attention to. So you've got, and as soon as I say that, it's just impossible. So I'll just show you. The Appraisal District is in charge of calculating this number right here. If you ever find a difference between the market value and what they might call a homestead capped value or an appraised value, the word appraised, you could literally just replace the word appraised with homestead capped value. The difference that you see between this and this only exists because my homestead exemption is protecting the value. So you get some benefit here where you're not taxed on the full market value of the property. You're taxed on some amount less than that. However, you'll take a look, that $280,000. Let me go here, and I don't know what year I clicked on. Let me find here. So that was the year 2023. Let's go to the 2023. I don't know if it's going to show up here. 208. So you can see the 280,000 number is showing up here. But what happens is on the school district portion of your tax bill, there's an amount that's even less than that $280,000 number, because the homestead exemption provides even additional benefit by subtracting even more money once it gets to the tax assessor's office. And so when they take that final value after they subtract everything due to the savings that you get through your homestead exemption, they multiply it by the tax rate, and then they figure out how much money, in this case, the school district is actually going to get. And so some of the new legislation, it allowed them to reduce this number even further. So after the appraisal district does their valuation process, if you've got a homestead exemption, the tax assessor will reduce it even further if you have exemptions, and that reduces your actual tax bill. And so that's kind of how the system works. All of these entities are the different entities that receive money when you pay your property taxes. And the homestead exemptions work a little, and all the other exemptions, they work a little bit different with every entity. The school district portion of this is the one that gets all the headlines because it's the largest portion of your tax bill. And so I just wanted to bring it back to where Dr. Sanchez was talking about a real focus on the people that need the most help, that have the least amount of money. We don't want anybody getting taxed out of their home. And I think that since there isn't a low income exemption, what the state of Texas has done is they have applied a flat amount of reduction to the school district tax. And so that's really important. Anytime you have a flat amount of a reduction versus a percentage-based reduction, so flat fee reduced versus a percentage reduced, the flat fee amount will help the lower income folks, lower property value folks even more. Some exemptions out there are based on a percentage, and so it tends to help the folks that have the higher property value even more. And so there are just some unique factors that go into property taxes and what makes the system unique. But let's get, I just want to explain this because it's kind of like a real opportunity to get on, show you how to navigate these things and break down kind of how some of these things work. It's 10 minutes or a webinar like this isn't enough to really go into detail to explain it fully, but I just wanted to be able to demonstrate that in a nutshell. So let me go to this. In Tarrant County, you can go here and see the exemptions that your home has. And like the chief appraiser mentioned, the only thing you're not going to be able to see are over 65 exemptions. Okay. You just have to call into the appraisal district, send them an email and say, hey, do I have an over 65 exemption applied to my property? In Doughlas County, I could go over and show you how to navigate that website. I've got it pulled up, but due to time, I just figure it's just like, it's very simple. It's just like this. You get on, you put your property address, and you can navigate to find these same exact numbers on the Doughlas County side. Both Doughlas and Tarrant have they maintain exemptions, and they also are the entities that you would go to if you want to protest your property tax value. And that's this number right here. That's what Chief Appraiser mentioned is part of the process. And so I want to dispel some of the rumors on that and just encourage people, if they think that their home might be overvalued, to protest. I want to show you how to do that really quick, and then we'll come in and talk about some of the misconceptions. Okay, so in Tarrant County, they have made it very easy to protest. First thing you're going to do is get that value notice that he showed where it had the PIN number that he mentioned, and you go here to the website and click this button, and you can create an account. After you create an account, you'll be able to navigate through. They've made it very easy to just navigate through. You put your PIN number in there, and then there's a dashboard where you can go and just dispute the value of your home. It's a very simple process where you're just clicking a few buttons. You put the value in the website that you think your home should be valued at, and you click a few buttons and you see if they will accept that right off the bat. Okay. And if they do, then your value's reduced and it's a happy day and you move on down the road. If that doesn't work, and a lot of other counties have a similar system. I think Tarrant County's is easier than most. Doughlas County, there's a way for you to file a protest online. Then there are certain rules that apply to all counties. And if you think that your value is too high, according to the appraisal district, then the next question you want to ask yourself is, how much time and money and energy do I want to spend trying to get this value corrected? And the process to the process to protest, it varies depending on how much time, effort, and energy you want to put into it. There are folks like me that will protest for you in Tarrant County. I protest for people for free, but I would rather teach you what to do so you can go on and do it yourself, just like I showed. If you think that the value that you can get online isn't as low as as what would be accurate, then just like the chief appraiser mentioned, you gather information to help justify the value you believe should be placed on your property. He mentioned photographs. I think that's great. Anything to demonstrate the condition of the property and show that due to the condition, it shouldn't be worth what other properties are selling for. Another piece of evidence you can use to demonstrate the condition is repair estimates. I think that's very vital. It's a very useful piece of information, because when you get a repair estimate, you're going to get an actual dollar amount that's associated with that. And a photo is great. Photo's worth 1,000 words. Well, a repair estimate is worth money. They'll a lot of times just reduce the value in a proportionate amount to your repair estimate. As long as it's a major repair, then they are pretty friendly. They're looking for a reason to correct those records. If you think that there's something inaccurate, you bring evidence, then they're usually pretty friendly. So I can go into detail talking about how to protest, and I've got all sorts of tips and tricks, but I just want to focus for the next couple of minutes just dispelling some rumors. And so right off the bat, Mr. Bobbitt, I want to this is something that you might not feel comfortable introducing yourself, but you're going to answer the question honestly, because we've talked about this before. I think that there are a lot of people that have property condition issues, and their home may not be valued, or it may not be worth what the appraisal district is valuing at. And I've heard some people say that they're afraid that the appraisal district might receive these photos and repair estimates from the homeowner and turn around and hand them to the code compliance office, and they'll come in and condemn the property. And so I just want to ask you, have you ever known an appraisal district? Is that a common practice for appraisal districts to take that condition evidence and hand it over to the department in the city that would come in and condemn the property because of those condition issues?
No, I'm not aware of any time that's happened. We share data, so like we get permits from the city. That way we know to go add new construction, or if somebody, if it was red tag, like we get the red tag or green tag permits, and then we go out and look at those because we want to update the condition. So we do exchange some data, but I'm not aware of anything that would show that we know that the property's in bad condition, and then that triggering the city to go out there and red tag it.
Excellent. And so if I understand you correctly, the majority of the information sharing, just about all of the information sharing, is you guys trying to get information from those entities.
Yes.
So that you can create, arrive at an accurate value. You're not really looking to give that information to anybody else. You're just trying to do an accurate appraisal. Is that right?
Yes. Usually the entities only want to know total value and how that rolls up, but they're not, looking at our.
Excellent. And that's what I've known to be true. I just think it's a real opportunity to have him here participating. I just wanted to ask the question because I know that is a concern that a lot of people have. And I think before I started on this path to help people with property taxes, I didn't know any better. And so I would just look at the government like it's one big bad bully, and all government is the same, and the government's the government. But what I found out as I started learning more and more, that the government the government is not one big organization. It's like several different organizations. So you've got the appraisal district here, and you've got the tax assessor here, and then the cities over here, and the counties over here, and they are all different types of governments, but they're really separate for the most part. And so one concern that I've heard is about citizenship status. So here in America, there is no requirement to be a citizen to purchase property. And so we've got several people that we know of that may not have, they have different levels of citizenship status, whether it's a visa, work visa, or who knows what. I can't even keep it all straight. That's out of my league. But You guys are just the entity that values the properties. Y'all don't deal with immigration or any kind of situation like that. So you're not asking about citizenship status or anything like that. If somebody owns a property and they feel like it's valued incorrectly, are they, is there any reporting that where y'all ask about immigration status or report that information anywhere?
No, the only thing that we need is for the homestead, we need a state ID that shows the address. That's all we need. And
Okay,
that's
excellent. And I think that that's a great thing to talk about to kind of bring it back to the subject here, which is how do you get this exemption in place? The main piece of identification you've got to have is some kind of state issued ID. It doesn't have to be a driver's license. It could just be another form of state issued ID that y'all deem acceptable, right?
Yes, so there, yeah. The
Okay.
business,
Yeah.
we can accept it.
Yeah, so if I may, so is it that is other or is only the driving license? It could be another document? Because it
So-
seemed to me that it was a driving license.
Well, that's the most common, but you can get a state ID from Texas that's, probably looks like a driver's license, just doesn't have, you're not licensed to drive.
Yeah. Well, the thing is that in most instances, you need to prove certain legal status. It's not easy to get one, but that may be probably.
Yeah, and this is the something that we've run into in our office where somebody has different immigration status and we're trying to
Yeah.
help them figure out what kind of documentation
Mhm.
to send over to the appraisal district. And I think that there are definitely some other people here that could probably help analyze and dissect the complicated, or the stuff that I'm not aware of on how to get different types of documentation to be able to give the appraisal district what they need. It's just what's happening here is you've got different government organizations that are really unrelated. They're not cooperative. They just have to have one organization has to have a government document that came from another one. And they're not really talking. It's just this is what they need in order to process their exemptions. And that's kind of it. But you don't have, so there are definitely challenges in getting that documentation. I'm sure. But it's their focus is just processing the exemption. So I want to come back to the protest process because I've heard so many people, especially folks that are new to America, have different ideas on how the government feels about protesting against the government. That just automatically sounds scary, and especially it's kind of a, if I didn't understand anything more about the property tax system, I would say any kind of effort to get out of paying taxes seems scary to me. You don't want to make the government mad, but what I found out is when just what you said in your presentation, Mr. Bobbitt, which was there are so many properties that have to be valued that the appraisal district can't be aware of the condition of the properties. They depend on the homeowner to communicate that to the appraisal district. And there are all sorts of situations that happen that adjust property value. They affect the property value. And when you're in charge of an organization that has to come up with a valuation for hundreds of thousands of properties, it's just impossible to get it right every time. You do a pretty good job. But anytime, me as a real estate broker, anytime I'm trying to determine the value of a property, what I look at are what other properties near the subject property, what other properties have sold for recently, and the condition of the other properties that have sold recently. And usually what I'll find is I can find sometimes 5 properties or so that have sold recently that are pretty similar to the subject property. And those properties will range in value anywhere from, let's say on this property I was just showing on the screen, it was about a $300,000 property. So if I found 5 properties nearby that have sold recently, they might range in value from $280,000 to $320,000. So now the question is, okay, what is the actual value of the home? How do you prove this? Well, the truth is, nobody knows until somebody comes along and pays for the property. That's how we know what it's worth. And it sounds silly, but that's actually it. And so any effort that the appraisal district takes to try and determine and come up with an idea of what the home is worth, is an opinion. It's an opinion that's supported by facts and reason based on that data, that evidence. If a homeowner looks at the same evidence, the homeowner might say, you know what? I can see that range of properties. The appraisal district might have picked something kind of in the middle because they're trying to come up with a pretty honest, objective way to value all the properties. As a homeowner, if I know that my home isn't worth as much because maybe it has a really bad odor, or maybe the condition is really messed up, or maybe there's something next door to my house that the appraisal district didn't see, like a large transformer, or some kind of eyesore where like a creek that's polluted or something like that might affect the value. Then what I can do is I can take that information and say, hey, I think my property is worth something on the lower end of that range. I just need to take that evidence that I think might justify a value on the lower end of that range and bring it to the appraisal district, and they will accept the value. And this is something that they're not mad about. They're okay with. They're not going to jump for joy when they have tons of people coming to protest, but you're not going to end up on some kind of naughty list, no blacklist. The government's not going to hate you. This is part of the normal process that the appraisal district depends on homeowners protesting, or else they would never be able to appraise all the properties accurately. It's kind of a cooperative process. Me as the homeowner, I have knowledge of the condition of my home and other things going on around my home. If I didn't communicate that to the appraisal district, they couldn't do an accurate value if there are some of those items. Some people are served really well by the appraisal district because there's nothing unique about their home that would cause the value to go up and down that range. And if you think it's accurate, then guess what? You sit at home and you don't do anything. But if you think there is an issue, I just wanted to mention kind of an all-encompassing thing, that it is not well, and I should just ask this one last question, since I've kind of gotten in the habit of asking him questions. Do you end up on a naughty list? Do y'all keep a record of who's protest and treat those people any worse than anybody else?
No, I say we treat everybody equally. That's our goal. We have to maintain public records. So we know who is protested, but that doesn't really go into that. When we value the property next year, we don't value them any differently because they filed a protest in the prior years.
And y'all aren't reporting that to any other government agency or anything. It's a safe thing to do.
Yes.
Right, there you go. And I will tell you firsthand, last year I protested for 40,000 properties, and you can see, I think fondly of Chief Appraiser Bob. In fact, he's pretty new to the job. The Tarrant Appraisal District has improved greatly since he started there. And these are a lot of people that are just going to work to value properties, and they're perfectly happy for y'all to protest. And so I think it takes a webinar like this to kind of dispel some of the rumors and that sort of thing, just to help people understand this is a good thing. And this is something that you owe to yourself, owe to your family, to protect that generational wealth, so that you have something to pass on to your kids. And just like that bar graph I showed in the beginning, where the line, it just goes up. With the exception of that 1 year, I'm just going to pull it right back up, and then I'll end on this and take questions however long these guys want to do this. But when you buy a property, I know that there are people, let's say in Southlake. Southlake is one of the most affluent areas in the entire Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. If you bought a property in Southlake in 1990, then you were buying a house that was around $100,000 or so. I mean, it was going to be a reasonable purchase price. It's before Southlake became Southlake, and all of a sudden, all these people came in and kept buying houses, and all the doctors and CEOs moved to the area, and now those $100,000 homes are worth $1 million in some cases, and it's really staggering. And this is something that you don't have to go to work for. It's just your home, your asset goes up in value. And the biggest challenge you have in an environment like that in our system is to figure out how you can continue to afford that house as the taxes go up and that sort of thing. And so my hat's off to these guys for putting a webinar together like this, because that's something that we all need to do to make sure that we can protect that. And I feel like that kind of hits the surface of everything I just wanted to mention. Thank you.
Thank you, Chandler. So I do want to mention, we got started a little bit late today. We were planning on ending at 1:15, I do want to be respectful of everybody's time, and I do want to remind you that we are recording this session today. So if anybody needs to leave, you'll be able to catch anything you missed. If you haven't done so already, there is a link in the chat that will take you to a form where we'll get your email address, and we have that. Then we will follow up as soon as possible, again, with link to the recording, all of the materials that we shared today. And keep in mind, we won't do anything else with your email address. It is simply just to get the information out. I do want to mention, I saw in the chat, Chandler, it was asked if you do any classes or hold to help people kind of effectively file this protest. I do want to say real quick that today is, you noticed in the title, it's part 1. There is a part 2 that is planned, and that conversation is going to take place on April 12th. I believe it starts at 10. It'll go for a couple hours, so let's say 10 to 12. And that's going to be at the Victory Forest Community Center. And so, you know, as a follow-up to today, that's going to be a great time to an in-person opportunity to ask some of the more personal questions that maybe you don't feel comfortable asking in front of the audience. But yeah, so encourage everyone to jot that down. If you do have any other questions, the Neighborhood Association, both Vicki and Rosemary are great resources for that. And again, that's something else that will be reminding everybody and getting out with all of those materials. So yeah, so that being said, Chandler, if you wanted to follow up with that as far as answering that question, and then yeah, again, folks, you can stick around. We'll continue the conversation. I know people, if you have any other questions, stick them in the chat. But otherwise, yeah, we'll just have a discussion.
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to stick around as long as you guys want. So to answer the question is, what is the process to successfully protest? And I would say there are a lot of misconceptions on what it takes to file a protest. The protest process is really 2 main steps. The first step is super, super easy. It requires no homework. It's just literally probably less than a 5-minute process. And all you have to do to file the protest, I want you to actually think of this more like filing an intent to protest. It's just informing the appraisal district that you're not happy with the value and you are going to dispute it. And you're just letting them know that. You don't have to get any of the evidence together. Nothing like that. What you have to do is either go online to your county's appraisal district website. There's always going to be an online form for you to be able to submit a protest online. It's just clicking a few buttons. You literally click a button that says, I want to protest, and you click submit, and that's it. There are no comps, there are no photos, nothing like that. Mr. Bobbitt showed a form that a lot of people are going to get in the mail. And this is the value notice that comes every year. It comes usually around April 15th, and it'll have a deadline on that form. Most people's deadline is May 15th. And so the real legal sticking point here is what you've got to do is you've got to get your protest filed before that protest deadline. And all you have to do, if you're not going to do it online, you take that value notice, you turn it over, and you fill out the form. You're literally checking one box and signing the thing. That's the minimum you have to do. And then you send in that form. You don't have to do any more homework. That satisfies the legal requirement of filing the protest. Now, what gets a lot of attention is what you have to do for step 2, which is to argue the value and demonstrate and prove the value of your property. And that's the second part of it. And so on that part, there are like a few different levels of escalation you can go to. You can, in Tarrant County, they've made it really easy for you to do the proving the value part. They've made it really easy. You're just clicking a couple buttons, you put the number in, and then you're done. Excuse me. In other counties, and if you're not happy with that, then that's when all of the I'm going to choke to death here. That's when you get all the evidence together to demonstrate the value. So it would be getting photos of the property, repair estimates, if you know a realtor that can provide some comparable sales to demonstrate what other properties are selling for, if you think yours isn't selling for as much as what they're saying, that's when you get that evidence together. And where you go from that, you've got to get it into the hand. I recommend talking with an appraiser at the appraisal district to see if they'll just kind of in a friendly way just look at your evidence and say, oh yeah, this for sure it's overvalued, and then they'll reduce it. A lot of times if you're bringing evidence, they'll just do that. If they're not willing to reduce the value, then that's when you go to a formal hearing. And it's like, remember I said there's different levels of escalation. That's a higher level of escalation. That's when you really have to have everything buttoned up, all your I's dotted, T's crossed. I can go deep into that, but I would say for 90% of the people, either that online process or just talking to a chief appraiser is going to solve it. The main thing to focus on right now is, after you get your value notice, just make sure you submit your intent to protest before the deadline, and then the rest of it you can figure out. You call the appraisal district, call my office, call one of these folks here on the webinar, and we can help walk you through the next steps.
Right. So I'm curious, are there resources that's available just to help owners understand how their appraisal compares to similar properties in the neighborhood?
That's a great question. It's that's where it gets kind of complicated. It's hard. You can count on the fact that the appraisal district did put those numbers together and they've got some of that information. If you're in Tarrant County, it's really easy for me to help, and so we can help give you that information. But the appraisal district in Tarrant County is pretty friendly. Other appraisal districts are some of them are just kind of behind and stressed out because they're overworked, and so sometimes they're not as friendly. A lot of times it's just because they're stressed out. But you can ask them for the evidence that they have against you. In fact, that's a legal right that you have, is if you want to file a protest and then ask them for the evidence that they're going to use against you, they'll give you that evidence. And then what you might do is take that evidence and turn around and hand it to a realtor and say, hey, does this look right to you? And let them kind of do an assessment. That's how you, having little to no knowledge of property values, appraisals, that sort of thing, can just make sure you're getting a fair shake, and is get that evidence and have a realtor evaluate it. And most realtors are extremely philanthropic, and they're happy to help. So, and if you need a referral for somebody, I know people in most counties that will help for free.
We put that evidence out on our dashboard, and so if you create an online dashboard, we'll have our market and equity evidence out there for your review.
Excellent. So I do have another follow-up question, and I'll open it up to any of the panelists. And we talked about really making a strong case in order to protest. And I'm curious, when we're talking about making the strongest case that we can, also kind of getting into the photos that people are taking, are we talking things like foundation cracks, roof damage, or does that also include things like an outdated kitchen, outdated modes that, so just kind of curious to see kind of what falls into that if you really want to make the strongest case.
I want to hear Mr. Bobbitt answer this one.
Anything that would affect your ability to sell the property. So, like a lot of times people will bring us, like their tree died. We don't value trees, and so that'd be the main thing, like landscaping. We're not gonna have that calculated into our appraisal. And so if you tell me your tree died, I'm probably not gonna make any changes to it because we didn't value the tree to begin with. But if it's out of date compared to what is typical for that age of a house, deferred maintenance, roof, foundation, flooring, any other kind of repairs that are typical, we can easily adjust for. Chandler mentioned stuff nearby your house. So if you live next to landfill, if we have evidence that we can show that living near that landfill impacts your property value, then we'll try to take that into account. But if when we look at sales, if we don't see any impact, then you may need to bring something. You may need to talk to a realtor and get some more information to come and show, okay, here's some other sales that sold near a landfill and that impacted them $10, $10 a square foot or something. We want to be able to justify and quantify that we may agree with you that there is some impact, but if we can't quantify it, it may be hard for my appraisers to say, okay, let's knock it off 5%.
Thank you.
I think it's a great point. I just want to mention something else. A lot of times we'll have people reach out and say, yeah, there's a landfill next to my house. there's no way my house can sell for as much as somebody else. But unfortunately, our housing market in Texas is just really robust, and we've got a lot of people moving into Texas every single day. And so if somebody is willing to buy a property right next to that landfill and pay an arm and a leg for it, guess what? They just killed your argument, because if somebody's willing to pay an arm and a leg for that house next to your landfill, then the appraisal district's going to look at, and any realtor, any appraiser is going to look at that and say, well, I know that I wouldn't want to live next to that landfill, but as long as somebody's willing to live next to that landfill and pay a lot of money, that means that your house is probably worth that. You could probably sell it for that. And so, just like he's saying, though, you got to make your case, figure out something. I mean, I've gone in, and we're dealing with human beings. The people at the appraisal district, contrary to public perception here, they actually are human. They're just normal people that go to their job. They don't really have a concern for anybody's value other than they want to get it accurate. And then they actually do have a heart. They want to make sure that people aren't being mistreated. And if you talk to them and you talk to them respectfully, then they'll hear you out. And they're also people that you can persuade. And if you've got some kind of factual data to support your take on it, then they're going to have open ears. You may not agree at the end of the day. They might not agree with you, but I've taken in news articles and studies before that show the impact of certain things on one thing. Back when I first started, there was a radio tower next to a house, and it showed the impact of property values on a radio tower. I couldn't get that to show up in the property data, but I brought that in, and this was in Denton County, so it has nothing to do with him. But they were like, you know what, that does demonstrate that should have some effect on value, and so they knocked off $5,000 of the value for that news article, or that it was a study or something like that I just found by Googling. But it was factual information. It wasn't just my opinion. It was something that justified some impact on value. So you never know. If you believe it's true that it affects value, then the key is just to get some kind of evidence that will give them the justification to go along with it.
Excellent. Well, I think that that is a great place for us to end today. I know you guys have all shared a wealth of information. Hopefully, everybody that attended, you've got some more questions. Again, we will be holding the in-person, so I definitely encourage you guys to attend that. If you have questions, again, we can reach out to us and get you those details. But as we wrap up today, I want to give a huge thank you to all of our panelists for sharing not only your knowledge, but your time. And again, a big thank you to all of who showed up today. We really appreciate you being here and for your great questions. Again, if you want to get this recording or anything else, there's that link in the chat. And again, we'll be doing a part 2. So this is not the end of the conversation. It's really just the beginning. So until we meet again, I just want to say on behalf of the Worth Heights Neighborhood Association, the University of Texas, Arlington School of Social Work, and especially Dr. Marcela Nava, who had a huge part in putting this together. Also, Councilwoman Jeanette Martinez from District 11. I also want to recognize Rachel Ariano, who is the Chief of Staff for the Office of Councilwoman Jeanette Martinez. Thank you so much for being here. Again, thank you all for showing up for your family, for your neighbors, and for your future. So take care, and we'll see you all soon.